Is Milch Oppenheimer your favourite character? Do you wish you knew more about his pets, his lifestyle, and his gaudy sense of fashion? No? Well, you're going to, because Milch received a short story titled A Not-So-Graceful Day from Master Milich, which was included in the Genso Suikoden Short Story Collection 1, a book that released in Japan in August 2000. This story is set in the solar year 449, 3 years after the War of Succession, when Milch was summoned to Gregminster Palace by Emperor Barbarosa, and it's told from the perspective of Milch's cat Ruth. The story begins with Milch waking up at dawn. When he wakes, he puts a dressing gown on over his pajamas and grooms his hair. He then rings a bell on his bedside table exactly 3 times. 3 servants then arrive carrying his breakfast. This morning's breakfast included freshly baked croissants, boiled eggs with truffles, and steamed vegetables served with milk tea. Once he's done eating, he serves his cats their breakfast with a bowl of milk. See, a real cat owner would feed their cats first because we know how incessantly annoying they can be when they want something. Milch adopted his cat Ruth 3 years ago when he was abandoned outside of Milch's mansion when the War of Succession broke out. This is impossible as Milch was accompanying Barbarossa in the Kunan region when the war broke out. But anyway, he named the cat Ruth DiMangio. Milch adopted a second cat called Mile Fuye 2 years ago. She originally belonged to a friend of his, but the owner and their family lost their lives when their house burned down, and Milch adopted their cat when he found her crying over the ruined remains of their house. The moment Ruth laid eyes on Mile, he immediately fell in love and proposed to her, and they were married within 6 months, but it wasn't until they got married that he realised how violent she was. Milch watches his cats eat their breakfast, and then he goes out to the balcony to water and talk to his plants. Milch gave all of his flowers names, and his current favourite flower was named Madame Borgia, which was a unique rose he cultivated himself. Once the plants are watered, Milch enjoys a long morning bath. While Milch bathes, his cats patrol their territory and take a morning nap on the item store's roof. The cats return at noon when Milch gets out of the bath to select his outfit for the day. After dressing, Milch enjoys some sandwiches on the terrace before heading to the castle to fulfill his duties for the day. Are you guys excited yet? Because it's about to get even less interesting. The next morning, Milch wakes up to find Ruth curled up at his feet. He spots a scratch on Ruth's nose and asks Ruth what happened. Ruth and Mile had a fight last night. Mile had been gaining weight over the past few months, and Ruth told her that if she doesn't lose the weight, he's divorcing her. Mile glared at him coldly before swiping him in the face and running out of the room. Ruth sighed and decided to go look for Mile, but not until after eating breakfast, of course. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. It was Pierre, the butler, whose real name was John, but Milch renamed him the moment he became his butler. Pierre apologized for the intrusion and informed Milch that an urgent letter has arrived from His Majesty Emperor Barbarosa. Milch read over the letter and was shocked to see that he had been summoned to the palace to meet with the Emperor. He began to worry that something has happened and that it must be an issue regarding the army. Milch then ordered Pierre to fetch him a formal outfit and his brand new lemon yellow hat. Milch then had his breakfast and took a bath to prepare for his meeting with the Emperor. Ruth left in search of Mile, but she was nowhere to be found. Ruth returned to find Milch dressed in a blue and white striped puffy outfit. The top 3 buttons on his shirt were undone and he wore a yellow scarf around his neck. Milch sat in front of a mirror complaining that the right side of his hair was slightly raised and called for his barber. The barber held his breath and with sweat dripping down his forehead, he cut the uneven hair. Milch then asked the barber to trim his mustache, and with the scissors touching his mustache, a young apprentice butler called Andre came storming into the room in a panic. Andre's real name was Tom, but just like John, aka Pierre, he was also given a new name. The barber froze and Pierre scolded Andre for barging into the room without knocking. Andre apologized in a panicked voice and revealed that he can't find Master Milch's hat. Pierre asked him if he checked the closets, and Andre said he searched them all and there's no sign of it. Pierre then apologized to Milch and left the room in search of the hat. Milch's scheduled meeting time with the Emperor was fast approaching, and Milch was pacing back and forth in a panic as Pierre still hadn't returned with the hat. Pierre finally arrived and apologized to Milch, explaining that the hat is missing. He then asked Milch if he could wear a different hat, to which Milch responded, If Barbarossa's armor was stained red with blood instead of being golden, would he still be worthy of being called the Golden Emperor? He continued by saying that the Emperor's appearance gives him faith in the security of the Empire, and that he, Milich, must always be dressed as beautiful as a flower to be worthy of the title of the Flower General. Andrei knocked on the door and informed them that he found the hat. Milch's face lit up and asked where it was, but Andrei fell to his knees and began apologizing that due to his carelessness he can't wear the hat. Milich thought Andrei was acting strange and ordered him to bring him the hat, and that he'll judge if it can be worn or not. Andrei replied that it's not possible. Milich then ordered him to take him to the hat immediately. Andrei led them up into the dusty attic, and in the corner of the attic they spotted Milich had given birth to a litter of kittens in the hat. Spotting Milich, she let out a meow and began licking her kittens. Ruth was shocked to see that Milich had given birth, as he thought she had simply gotten fat. Milich ordered Pierre to fetch an old green feathered hat and began picking up the kittens, snuggling them against his face and showering them with kisses. As Milich snuggled the kittens, they clung to his mustache. The next 2 to 3 pages are Ruth and Milich arguing about Ruth's previous comments of divorcing her if she didn't lose weight. They agreed to stay together until the kittens were weaned. Pierre returned with the old green hat and Milich placed the kittens inside it. He then took the stained lemon yellow hat and returned to his room, where he snipped a rose flower from his precious Madame Borgia to make the hat stand out. Pierre questioned if Milich was really planning to wear that dirty stained hat to meet the Emperor. The town bell that rings at noon then began to ring, and Milich rushed out the door. Pierre and Andrei chased after him, trying to convince him to change his mind. Milich mounted his horse and told Pierre that he appreciates his loyalty before riding off. Pierre muttered, "It's not just the hat." Milich rode through the streets of Gregminster, with Ruth chasing after him along the rooftops. Ruth caught up to Milich at the palace stables, pleading with him to return home, but naturally Milich couldn't understand cat tongue. Milich told Ruth to go home and entered the palace, but Ruth continued following him. As Milich walked through the palace, Sonia Shulin stopped him and asked him what happened to him. Milich responded that he received urgent summons from the Emperor and that he's on his way to meet him right now. Sonia tried commenting on Milch's appearance, but he cut her off, saying there were various matters he had to deal with and he's pressed for time. Milich then took his leave and headed for the audience chamber as Sonia called out to him, telling him to wait. Milich reached the audience chamber and Ruth snuck inside as he spoke to the guards. Milich then entered the audience chamber and knelt before Barbarossa. Ruth looked on from a distance, and Milich didn't look as beautiful as he thought he did. His lemon yellow hat was now reddish brown and had completely lost its shape from Milich giving birth in it. His face and clothes were covered in dust and stains from being in the attic and cuddling the newborn kittens, and his mustache was a dishevelled mess. Barbarossa apologized for summoning him on such short notice, and Milich responded by asking if something has happened. Barbarossa explained that he's been thinking about his deceased wife Claudia, and he was hoping to have lunch with Milich while reminiscing about her. He then asked Milich about the flower on his hat. Milich explained that it's a new type of rose that he crossbred himself. Milich asked if he could offer the rose to Claudia's grave, but Barbarossa rejected, stating that Claudia preferred a gentle colour. Milich then suggested that next time he'll bring a white armour rose, and asked Barbarossa what he'd like to eat for their lunch. Barbarossa apologised for having summoned him and stated that an urgent matter has come up and that they'll have to postpone their lunch. Milich then informed Barbarossa that he'd return to his duties, but Barbarossa replied that he doesn't look in any condition to work and suggested that he look in a mirror and return home as soon as possible. Milich bowed and left the audience chamber, but Barbarossa's comments left him confused. Milich looked in a mirror and immediately felt sick. He took a carriage ride home and spent the next 2 days in bed with a fever. During those 2 days, Ruth and Milich reconciled, and they now resided as a family in a basket in Milch's bedroom. The next day, Milich returned to the palace with a bouquet of white armour roses to meet with the Emperor. Milich knelt before the Emperor with his head held down and apologised for his unsightly manner the other day and for being unable to fulfil his duties. Barbarossa commented that it was hard to hear Milich talk while he was kneeling with his head held down. Milich raised his head but was startled when he noticed a woman standing next to Barbarossa who bore an uncanny resemblance to Claudia. Milich asked who she was, and Barbarosa introduced her as Windy, the new court magician. Windy then introduced herself to Milich. Ruth, who had once again snuck into the palace while following Milich, got a bad feeling as he sensed that something was off about Windy. The smile on her face reminded him of the way Milich smiled right before one of her violent outbursts. And that's it for Milich's short story. As I mentioned at the beginning, this story came from a short story titled A Not-So-Graceful Day for Master Milich from the Genso Suikoden Short Story Collection 1 that released in Japan in 2000. If there are any other character short stories you want me to cover, let me know in the comments below. You can find a list of all characters who receive short stories in the pinned comment. Or if there are any other Suikoden related topics or non-Suikoden related topics that you want me to make videos on, do let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.